And we are live. Welcome, welcome everyone to Omi Inca's production studio. You've got your Omi Inca 7 live today, coming to talk to you about surviving the door of no return. People, I am just wondering, and most of you thinking like I'm thinking in 1619 at the transatlantic slave trade, how much of the story is true and how much of the story may be a fallacy, but we do know we had a Mayafa. And I wanted to come to touch bases with you today because a large portion of our children don't know anything about the door of no return. And I know that this is something that we should be preaching to our youngsters so that they can know how grateful they are for having came through their ancestors' loins through that door and making it through the door and surviving. You know, a lot of our extended families did not survive that door. Behind that door, I understand, through many people coming back to regurgitate what they saw at the castle of Alameda and in those dungeons where they were in waiting patterns. A lot of them died right in the area where they were standing, and a large portion of their fecal matter was they actually had to lay down and people trample over other people, as well as people did not make it out of those cavities. And once they left those doors, I understand that the sign was put on the door of no return. But fortunately, us African Americans have lived to return through visits back through that door of no return. So, what's it like? I had a chance to listen to a number of our brothers and sisters talk about the journey back home to Africa and to be able to go through the door of no return and to write a letter to their ancestors and to tell them how grateful they were to be able to go back to the homeland and to revisit them, and to also make their offerings on the ocean by casting their fruit to the ocean and making a dedication to their ancestors. It's a blessing that a lot of us lived through that ordeal. It was a major catastrophe, I understand, and a large portion of people were brutalated, mutilated, and beaten and treated like cattle. But nevertheless, a group of our ancestors pressed through and made it back to the United States of America and lived to talk about it. Yes, there were some of our slave family members who made it back through this ordeal, through the door of no return, and were slaves in the United States, not indentured servants, but cattle slaves, and were able to talk to their loved ones about what it was like to come through that door of return and to survive. We're talking about the surviving mechanisms of our people. There are no other people on the face of this earth that have endured the type of cattle slavery that we've endured. And the major catastrophes and the separating of families, the mutilating the women through molestation and sodomizing the men, our people endured something great, I do believe. I don't believe this is a fallacy. I believe that the Mr. Enforcer fell so low below the standard of a prudent human being that he began to look at us as cattle. And we did go through the beatings, the molestations, and the humiliation. I know that they wouldn't have just created this fallacy, it had to have existed because a white man wouldn't let you put anything that devastating on him if half of it hadn't been true. But looking back over it, what part of it must we regurgitate to our grandchildren? What part of it must we withhold from our grandchildren? And what is so very important that we must leave them with so that they will never, ever allow a people to suppress African Americans again? Well, I think we must sit down with our children and tell them of the nature of Mr. Enforcer. They must learn the nature of Mr. Enforcer and his colonizing ways. They must not let these things slip up on them for fearing to think this man to be a human, when in fact he is a kind of human, but not necessarily a human being. Now, what I gather from this, and even writing my poetry, I began to write stories about what my Cossack records showed me about slavery and what the women went through on those slave ships. Afri'i was one of the young girls that was telling her story about her ordeal with slavery and how the men on the ship were raping the women and how they were taking them one by one. And it came in my spirit to write a song about Afri'i, wanting her to tell us what went on in those slave ships. Could she regurgitate to us what major ordeals that our people went through? And as I sang to Afri'i, she came to my spirit and she told me, yes, we went through horrific things on that ship. And I sang back to Afri'i in this poem of spoken word. What did they do to you on that slave ship? And did they not know that we would come and make retribution unto you? And I still think, just like the Jewish people, excuse me, often say that if we find anyone that participated in a Holocaust, we normally dealt with them. I think we ought to make an open show of those whose ancestors put African Americans in that horrific way. I think every year we ought to make a show and reenactivate what went on those slave ships, as well as in the door or at the door of no return. We cannot let anyone get off the hook, nor can we make our children think that this was lighthearted and it was easy. We must show them the horrific things that our ancestors had to go through to make them stronger. And we must tell them when Thanksgiving comes, or we must show them the videos that have been created so well to show them what actually went on behind the door of no return. And we must tell them to be grateful that they survived, and through their survival, they're required to make things better. I understand that there was weeping and a wailing as the young men and women came out of the dungeons and the castle of Almeida. And as the stench from the hallways and floors stayed in their nostrils, they could not even believe that one would be able to survive that major catastrophe. And here we look back on January the 18th of 2018 was when the documents were signed to celebrate our over 400 and some odd years of being out of slavery. Now they're asking us to come up with all type of activities that we can display and exemplify of what we've learned from coming out of 400 years of slavery. Well, I'll tell you, it looks like things haven't changed very much. A few things moved in certain positions to make us believe that we have overcome and we have made a great advancement. But to look back over your ancestors' suffering would be one that we could talk about. Those suffering moments still linger in the ears of some people, and that is why they're still suffering from mental illness because of that particular time in society. But coming through the door of no return means that we are to be celebrating a fellowship of making it over and make it we can regurgitate to our grandchildren. Hope that there will be a stronger people and that they will not endure and suffer what our ancestors went through. It is very necessary to pour libation on behalf of our ancestors, to allow them to be able to wash against the bricks and to display their anger and their hatred for their slave master, which I'm sure they still hold. And living through the slavery and going on to have their litter of children and their children living now, able to talk about their parents who were in captivity. When we look back at this whole scene, some of us are shamefaced. We don't want to know about 1619 when we went into slavery. We don't even want to know about 1865 when supposedly we came out of this peony and slavery in general. But the Jim Crow laws were much more harmful and harsher than some of the slavery. Because when you were promised 160 acres of land and 150 cash dollars, you knew that would have been enough to help you get on your feet. At least you would die trying. But for that to be forsaken in a treaty, which all treaties were forbidden and never negotiable, then you would think that we would never get out of slavery. Does anyone believe that we are now free? Does anyone believe that we're better off now than we were before? What must we tell our children about this major catastrophe of coming through the door of no return now that they've come out and we're out? What do we have to rally about around our children? We must let our children see this movie, first of all, and they must believe that it's real. And they've got to stop telling our indigenous Aboriginal family members that none of this ever occurred and that it didn't happen. Is it a psychological rearrangement? A job being done on our people? We cannot, all in the name of being Aboriginal and indigenous people, forsaken the suffering that our ancestors went through that traveled through that door of no return. It happened. It was real. Now, maybe they all didn't come to America, but a lot of them went to Spain, Portugal, and other places. But this situation and scenario happened. It was not someone making up a story to pass on, all in the name of us embracing the United States island as our homeland. We had to come from somewhere else prior to come here. And I say that somewhere else. I say that somewhere else is Africa. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, it had to have been Africa. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are indigenous of Africa, Arabia land. So it had to have been from somewhere over in Africa that we ventured from. Put my beautiful little flowers in here. Had to have been somewhere that we ventured from. Now, Let me say this. If your children do not know the story, they're apt to go through the same thing without even knowing that they're being incarcerated. But we have to, from time to time, remember the story of the door of no return. When I heard the story, I didn't believe it was true. I didn't believe that a human being could succumb or intake that much suffering. But it had to have happened because many of my brothers and sisters that went back on the voyage to go visit Africa, they say they heard the ancestors' voices and they knew that something had happened to our people at the door of no return. And I want to say for the record that we must oftentimes mark the date of these occasions and periodically revisit the situations again, like I'm attempting to revisit the door of no return. I never went through the door of no return. I only can imagine what it was like, but the suffering still lingers in my Cossack record of what our ancestors went through. The mutilated bodies and the weeping and the wailing still lingers in my psychic of what they went through. And on this day of January the 9th, I want to remember and recall the people who traveled through the door of no return. What was it like for them when they exited that door and boarded those ships and came to the United States of America or Spain or Portugal or wherever they had them go? What was it like? The suffering on the ships and the waiting pattern was enough just to think about once they became slaves. It wasn't like they became slaves immediately. Someone had to condition their minds and their physical bodies through small spaces that they held them in before they could actually make them a slave. So it was a process, you say then, Omi. Yes, by golly, it was a process. And by meaning that it was a process, it took so many hundreds of years to make our ancestors into slavery. They didn't go in there willingly, and they definitely were rebellious. Now, in thinking back, as they traveled through that door, and the remains of those people who didn't make it through that door, those souls yet still cry out. I understand that vultures still fly over the Alameda facility as if there's still the stench of the dead bodies still laying there for them to feast off. Who in their right minds would do to a people what was done to us? Who in their right minds would continue to rape and to sodomize a group of people who meant no harm to them? Well, you know, payday and payback is always retribution. It is like what you call karma. And as I remember these people, I asked myself, do I want my grandchildren to know about this slavery? And one side of me says, well, hold back because it may damage them. And the other side says, tell them. They must know. My children must know what happened to them. Then it would explain what they're going to still have to go through. Because this is a psychic rearrangement in the mind that turns the mind from time to such a low spirit where we don't know where it comes from and we can't pick ourselves up. At least the children will know what's the cause of these emotional spurs that spurs up in our mind and our body when we remember our ancestors who came through the door of no return. Something said to tell them they must know, because when their hearts become heavy, and when their psychic is very, very, very low, and their mental capacity is rearranged, they'll know what has caused these problems within their being. So why are we being ashamed of it? Why are we hiding the fact that our ancestors had to go through slavery? Why are we trying to dismiss it when this is the year that they want us to remember? 1806, they want us to remember now the 400 some years that we traveled this route of being accostic and being put in chains. But why do we say we must forget? We must forget and forgive. Why do we say that? It would be to suppress us even further and to put us in a holding pattern, waiting for someone to mess up again, making us to go off on them. Uncontrollable. So we must confront them with the open show of demonstrating this major ordeal that went through for over 400 years, and no other race did anything about it to stop it. No other people said, you mustn't do this to these human beings. You mustn't carry on like this, because you will be paid back through karma. Why didn't anyone else take the Caucasians' hand and move them away and say that this is sinful? You will pay for this. Why didn't anyone caution the Caucasian about the treatments that they extended to us humble people who are known as God's lost sheep? I say we should tell our children and be quick about it. Begin to start to show the movie, The Door of No Return. Begin to minister to them about forgiveness, and let them realize you can forgive if you choose to, but you mustn't never, ever forget. Never forget. Because this was harsh and inhumane. And this door of return represented death for the slaves once they got packed on those ships. Most of the cargo died in transporting. They could not make it through the fecal matter, the stench of the smell in their nostrils, or the lack of food that caused them to starve, and how they treated those rebellions, slaves who were considered as the slaves who were going to break free, how they starved them and how they left them for dead, and how they bolted them to the ground to only suffer. Yes, God will not be going on anyone that participated in the slave trade or the slave process 1,000 generation. As we remember today to talk about our 400 and some odd years of slavery, as we talk about what we can do in celebration of this day, I am marking this day to alarm those African Americans. You must be about the business of preparing yourself to what you are going to say to your children and how you're going to relate this information to the Caucasian who are now asking you, now, Negro, now that you've been out of slavery over 400 some odd years and you got your freedom, what do you plan on doing with your freedom? We must be prepared with our speeches. We must be prepared to talk about how we're going to openly make a show of slavery. Instead of us marching up and down the streets, we should make an open show of what was done to our people, all in the name of branding them, all in the name of treating them like cattle, all in the name of owning a human being. We've got that chance now during this year to talk about it. There'll be some non-for-profit companies giving monies, large sums of money, to put together their programs to reinactivate 400 years of slavery. I say we first start with the movies and showing youngsters these movies that are out there, the good ones, of course, like this On the Door of No Return. It's a free movie. You are to allow your children to watch it. It gives them the history of a large portion of Anouk Rashidi speaking, Reverend Wright, and Isaac Hayes. A number of the men are speaking about what went on when they took their trip back to Ghana. And that's what we all should be planning for, is a trip to Ghana, so that we can look at the land that became free, and that the president that worked so hard to give them their freedom, and get an understanding of what to tell our children. But we must tell them something. And it cannot be based on lies. No, we're not worried about how they feel about slavery. We mustn't hide slavery from them. We are not descendants of slaves, and we're not going to go around with a brand on our arms saying descendants of slaves. We are out of slavery now, but in another high form of the high-tech lynching. So we're not going to parade that on our arms or on any of our paraphernalia that we are slaves, descendants of slaves, but we're going to talk about how to never again to go back to that place where we once were. And I wanted to remind you, you must start educating your young children, because some of them are growing up in a suburban area, and some of them don't know anything about harsh treatments for Black. Some of them think they're equal to white. Some of them don't know how we had to have separate bathrooms and separate fountains. Some of them don't know how we had to purchase the Green Book to tell us which hotels were a safe place to rest at. Some of them think things were always good for us, but unless we tell them, they may be shocked when they find out that things have not changed that much. The more we think they've changed, the more they stay the same. But we must educate our children so that they won't be acting like little valley girls and little white boys who think they can go to school and play shoot 'em up. But it's very vital that they should know of the hard times that we had and the hard times that are possibly up ahead for them. We must inform them that we are still in a struggle, and the way we get out of the struggle is that we must purpose in our hearts that we will always pay homage to our ancestors, and we will never forget them. We must also make a dedication to libation and hold up our water cups, because we know water is neutral, water knows no enemy, and we must pour libation. I pray today in honor of this year being the 400 and some odd years that we've been out of slavery. Some say 430. And I'm not certain, so I'm just going to say 400 some odd years. I'm going to pour libation to redemption of being out of the chattel slavery. I say libation to Olodumare. I pour libation to Oromala. I pour libation to my mother's spirit, Yamenye. I say libation. I pour libation to my father's spirit, Obatala. Water knows no enemy, and I say libation to Obatala. I say Harambe, 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 Harambe. Do this in remembrance to your ancestors, to let them know that they still yet live through you, and demonstrate this before your children, so your children will know to do this too, to carry on this tradition. And this tradition shall be carried on in my household When I fall, who will pick up the tradition? One of the elders' children will pick up the tradition and carry it on, because we know it's important to mark a tradition, and we're marking this tradition this day. We say, "O Tutu, O Tutu, O Tutu, please accept our libation today as we come before you on this new year, and remembering our ancestors as they came through the door of no return, as they ventured out on the ships of badgering and molestation and rape. I call Afri'i, Afri, 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 Afri. Tell me, what did they say when they took your virginity away? Afri, 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 Afri. What did they say when they took your virginity away? Afri'i, 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 no. And we call out Afri'i name because she was one of the girls that came back to tell her story of what happened when they took her virginity away. And did they not know that I could redeem you through me? Afri'i, Afri'i, no. What did they say? Afri, 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 Afri. And as we look back over the years of the gruesome chattel slavery, we must purpose in our hearts to never forget and to always mark this as the occasion of the date of January 18, when the bill was signed in 2018, to give us a day that we could hollow out, that we could emancipate, so that never again will we have to stand at the door of no return. We are the survivors of those ancestors. We're the ones that made it out. We're no longer descendants of slaves, but we stand upright, carrying on the indigenous aborigines title. Yet we came from Arabia land, from Africa, and we cannot change that. We mustn't change that, because in Armida, in the slave castles, we know that those slaves were held there. It is evident they were in the trenches there. No one can change that. The smell and the stench is still in the atmosphere, and the buzzards still fly over the heads of these facilities that were unclean, that were left with human fecal and the human parts of the body ground into the ground. As we mark this occasion with our libation and our ritual, we call on Olodumare for a prayer for the beginning of the year. Olodumare, the God, the unseen God, the God with the big head full of wisdom, the unknown, the God who had no known relatives, no known next of kin, who produced himself from himself out of darkness. We call on Olodumare because we know he created Ori and clothed this ratified energy in matter so that it can sustain us, maintain us, and we can embrace Ori. And if we have any good accolades to give anyone, give them to Ori, because Ori, our head, has gotten us there. And we thank the God Almighty that he will speak into the ears of all of our children to never forget and to remember what their ancestors went through, so that they will not be proud and almighty and not be humble enough to be grateful for surviving the major catastrophe of coming out of the door of no return. As I sit here today, I'm one of the survivors, and our grandchildren will be a survivor, but they must reenactivate this ritual on a yearly basis to remember that we're the ones, the strong ones, who came out alive, and we're held with the obligation of creating our future, our institutions, and building on what our ancestors started, and to never forget that we're strong vessels, and we're not a kind of people, but we are made in God's own image and likeness. And we will be able to do greater things than our master Jesus did. And as we look at our gifts, we know that we have acoustic records that say that we have the ability to send the word. So we have the ability to send ratified energy across the airways. And it will not return unto us void, but it will accomplish that which is intended. And we call the word forth. We call forth all the powerful words that have authority, and we charge them with energy that they may accomplish that which is intended. Today we send the words across the airways that everyone must know that we must mark the occasion of leaving the door of no return, but to go back there and to fellowship with our African brothers and sisters and renew ourselves, and we grow strong again, never to be put through that chattel slavery again. I say amen, amen. Thank you, Father, that you have allowed us to come to you unrelinquished and speak openly to you about what we feel about those 400 years of in captivity. No one can hide them and say we didn't experience them. No one can say that we were in America when it happened, because some of us have experienced slavery. It may not have been your mother or your father and their lineage, but some of our brothers and sisters have gone through the transatlantic slave trade and experienced the chattel slavery and the colonization. But never, never again will we let this happen. And we shall tell our children, and they shall know about this moment, and they shall lift up arms against any type of chattel slavery again, to only die in their bootstraps, fighting against any type of chattel slavery that will ever be put on us African American indigenous people. I say, I salute you today. And as I pour libation today, be careful and be responsible for pouring libation. It is very vital that you understand the benefit of libation and how it hollows out a space and invites your ancestors in to reconnect to you and your melanin, to make you stronger in your group and give you the power and open the way. So when you use your magic, it will accomplish that which is intended. Yes, you do have magic, and you must remember you have caustic records in your mind, and you have your tools. You must take your magical tools out, and you must learn of them through reading your oracles. You must learn of them through casting lot. You must learn of them through counting your cowrie shells and making your markings. You must learn of them through doing your OB and offering sacrifice. You must understand that these things are powerful. This is what makes one powerful. You cannot be powerful through someone's ammunition. Our weapons are not carnal through the pulling down of strongholds, but our magic is powerful than a two-edged sword. And they cut going in and cut coming out. You must understand that our tongues and our voices are like a sharp two-edged sword. You must use the words that are powerful to become like a sword in your mouth. But it's very vital that we should call on our ancestors. I call on Clara Mae Jenkins Spirit today. I call on Robert Jenkins Spirit today, Edward Jenkins Spirit, Marvin Jenkins Spirit, Robert Jenkins Spirit, Eugene Jenkins Spirit. I call on Tommy P. Harvey Spirit, that their spirits may be present here today. Mary Lou Hawkins Spirit. I call on Michael Harvey Spirit, Tom Harvey Spirit, Michelle Harvey Spirit, Essa Lee Pope Spirit, Ruby Lee Bracken Spirit. I call on Isa Lee Spirit, Lily Spirit. I call on Ruby Lee Spirit. I call on Louise Spirit. I call on Lucille Spirit. And I call on Ludell Spirit. I call these spirits today together here on this new year as we prepare to talk about the 200 years that we've been out of slavery. So what is there to talk about? Out of these 200 years, we should make great gain. I foresee that we are going to get over the grain house. I foresee that many more of us are going to come into conscious mindedness with our traditional African religion. I foresee that many of us are going to come away from these our major slave masters religious. We're going to walk away from those religions, and that's the only way we can win this war. And Toussaint Louverture, Bookman Dadi, and John Jacques Dessalines said that we could overcome and win this war if we gave up our slave master's religion. Well, I've already given up my slave master religion. How about you? But it's very vital that we should not linger any long. Don't linger, don't linger, don't linger. Make the decision and make it quickly. It's very vital that a lot of great things are going to happen for us this year. A lot of great things are going to happen that will allow us to be able to make a difference in the Black race because our time has come. We've been beaten out of our 160 acres of land. We've been beaten out of 150 cash dollars. We've been beaten out of the land that we were supposed to crop. The treaty was broke. And the Indians didn't even want to give us our land. And we were staying in the residence with the Indian. And we were working side by side with them like brothers and sisters. And little did we know that they didn't even want to give us any other land, nor they didn't want to give us the right to be able to be in their particular tribes. But I say this year, we're going to all, as Black people, acquaint ourselves with a tribe, whether it be the Choctaw, Chickasaw. I'm talking about Choctaw, Seminole, Creed, Indian. Yes, we're going to be amongst the Chickasaw, and Choctaw, Creed, Seminole Indians. Yes, we're going to be walking beside them and engaging with our tribes because we are the original Aboriginal African people from Arabia land in Africa. Yes, we came to Turtle Island, but we came from somewhere, and that's our African tribe. So get ready, people, and get your headdress ready, but get your heads right, because we are going to have to acknowledge who we are as a people. Now that they're giving us this opportunity to say that we're out of slavery, they must take off the psychological chains of our brain. They must also remove the chains from our hands and allow us to roam freely. And we're going to take our freedom by force. We're not asking anybody for any freedom. You've now said that this is a year that we can declare our freedom. We're not going to ask you for our freedom. We're going to walk right in and take our freedom by force, because we have our tools now. And we're not working with ammunition that you know of that are military attribution. We are working with the ethers in the air and the magic from the master, which he has given us so freely. What has been freely given will be freely used, but you must know you have the magic. How can you use the magic when you don't even know you have the magic? You must know you have magic between the ethers in the air. And oh yea, the wind will bring the wind to you, and the ethers in the hair, even the ninth ethers in your ninth ether in your hair will carry the waves of the ninth ether through and to the higher heavens, and that is where Olodumare lives, and he will receive your generated caustic material. It's very vital that you know that you are peculiar people. And there's greater things that you are going to do than Jesus, the Master Yeshua, did. Someone asked me about the Master Yeshua. I said, yes, you call him Jesus, and some call him Yeshua, but I call him Orumala, who was at the right hand of Olodumare. He is known as a black Messiah in my book, as well as the representation of your Jesus, yet you paint him with blue eyes and blonde hair. He will never hear you as long as you picture him as the blue-eyed, blonde-haired soul brother. You must call him by his original name, Orumala. Orumala, the right hand of God. Orumala Omojo, Orumala Obore, Orumala Epele, Orumala. You must know him as Orumala, and Obatala as the father of all the Orishas, the man in white who carries a big stick. You must know your ancestors. You can't continue to go on calling your slave masters ancestors. Jesus was a man, but truly he was not a Christian. He wouldn't know who a Christian was if you came to him and explained it this day. You must know your proper ancestors and know them by their holy name. Yamenye, the big busted woman that is full of nurturing and love, who is represented by the ocean. Oshun, who is also a beautiful woman in yellow, who is represented by the ocean and the seas and the river. And as you look at Shango, you'll see the lightning in the sky. Then you'll know that that's Shango carrying the frequency of the lightning. It's very important that you should know the twins Ishun, that carries the message to God that you have a request. You must appease the twins before any request can be made to Olodumare. Now, I don't have very much time on these airways to acquaint you with our whole customs and tradition. Stick around. We're going to be doing more things on my channel, on the Oracle Divination Network, where we open up more, I guess you would call them, more cosmic teachings that you should know. But these are forensic things that you might not have heard of, but because it's a traditional African faith, it will be somewhat familiar. But then you must understand that we are not perpetuating Christianity, but perpetuating traditional African teachings and a way of life. Thank you so much for listening to this Eric broadcast. And I do hope that you will conduct your own ceremony for introducing the over 400 years of being out of slavery. This is something I thought that was necessary to do. And I didn't want to get too busy and wait to do this to after the fact. I think on the 18th is when they're going to start celebrating and throwing all kinds of parties and celebration. But I wanted to get a head start because this is one date that I wanted to remember. And I just put it on my calendar. It's January 9th. However, I know on the 18th of January, I'll possibly be celebrating again. I want to thank those who follow me and go down below. There's a subscription there. Why don't you subscribe to Omi Inka? Why don't you subscribe to Omi's production studio? You'll be glad you did. In our series, talking about HERO, the housing opportunities where people can get help with their houses, we're going to be doing a HERO segment on a regular basis to talk about housing and how you can get help with your bankruptcy through a pro bono service, and how to get help with your houses if you're losing them. You want to follow us under that HERO show, and we will be back on Blog Talk this year doing a whole segment that's focusing in on African traditional lifestyle. And you might want to call in because we might be doing a universal reading for the universe, and not individual readings per se, unless when we bring on a Baba Law. That's the only way we're going to do individual readings, because I will not be doing the individual reading. Now, I want to say for the record that you've been listening to Omi Inka 7. I would like for you to be not only my friend, but also subscribe to me. Go down there and hit that subscribe button and follow me. Do go on Facebook and follow me. I have quite a few friends, but I'm asking them now to become followers. We have movie nights sometime. We all come together to watch various different movies. I urge you to go out on your television, on your Roku or your special Fire Stick, and view the movie, The Door of Return. Review it with your children so they can have questions that you can answer, and make sure you explain to them what happened to us during slavery. That's part of what's going on with us now. We need to explain to our children what made us go so darn crazy and what was the stress that was put on us that is now reflecting on us right now through depression. I'd like to thank you so much. If you do want to respond, please leave a response for me. I can reach a response until I can figure out how to get you up on the screen and have you talking at the same time. I'm fairly new at this, but nevertheless, I've been on the airways for over 10 years this year in May. And I'd like to invite you to our movie night on Facebook, as well as coming on Facebook. We view on Facebook as well. And there you can view your comments, and you can sit and be able to gather with other people. We're going to be talking a lot about these 400 years that we've come out of slavery. What are we going to do with it? Now that we've got freedom, what are we going to do with it? Now that we have freedom, what are we gonna do with it? What are we gonna do with it? What are we gonna do with it? Now that we've got freedom, what are we gonna do with it? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Now that we found freedom, what are we gonna do with it? What are we gonna do with that freedom that we found? What are we gonna do with that freedom? I'll see you next time, and maybe we would have figured it out. And I say, oh, Dabo and Baba Booey to y'all. Straight ahead and into the future, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Straight ahead and into the future, Detroit, Michigan. Straight ahead and into the future, Dallas, Texas. Straight ahead and into the future, Gary, Indiana. Straight ahead and into the future, Indianapolis, Indiana, and Avon, Indiana. I'll see you next time. Stay tuned and do subscribe below to Omi Inca's Mind to Production and become a follower and follow the leader. Odavo.